This meeting of the Finance and Governance Committee begins now.
Ortega, the other at-large member.
Good afternoon, Stacy Gilmore, District 11.
Good afternoon, Joel Clark, District 7.
Good afternoon, Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Hello, Chris Hines, Perfect 10.
And do we have any members online that need to introduce themselves? We do not. If anyone joins us, we will certainly mention them. Well, we have four action items today. Oh, we do have a colleague online. So, Councilwoman Sedebaca, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Candy Sedebaca, District 9. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have four action items today, but they will all be part of the same presentation. And I believe we have someone from Technology Services, Craig, who's going to be presenting to us. So please introduce yourselves, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. So thank you for allowing us to come and present this today. And if you have any questions during, after, wherever, I'm willing to address those. I brought with me Joe Saporito, our contract subject matter expert, aka Guru. I've got Todd Matthews, who manages our network and voice infrastructure teams, and Chris Todd, who is the Chief Technology Officer within Technology Services. I am Sean Greer. I am the Director of Service Delivery within Technology Services, and today we'll be talking about four different contracts that we have going through the process to provide telecommunication services to the city. Oh, and we couldn't have done this without Mr. Steve Hahn, the attorney on this case that has diligently worked through and allowed us to really get to real contract value on these. Sorry, I was looking one way and not the other. So a little bit of background. The city manages telecommunications at approximately 180 sites within the city's region. These allow for connectivity between buildings back to the central data center to provide services to the entire city, whether it be internal employees or our citizens. In 2021, we did a public solicitation for these services, and out of 8 submissions, we awarded to 4. The approval for these, we are requesting the approval for these 4 contracts that are each 5-year terms. The 4 awardees were the Zayo Group, Allstream, Comcast, and CenturyLink Communications, also known as Lumen. They recently changed their name. These services, the spend for the entire city, which includes Technology Services, wastewater, DHS, and arts and venues, and a few other agencies, ranges between $2.8 to $3.3 million every year. That is in total. Types of services these provide. Contracts will be used to continue services and procure new services that support multiple essential services within the city. Interconnectivity between buildings, emergency services, internet connectivity for city services, security services to protect the city from such attacks of denial of service and other cyber crimes that we don't even know about yet. Phone services for local and long distance, and then analog lines for elevator emergency phones or parking lot emergency phones within city property and facilities. What is the purpose of these contracts? Why did we award to multiple partners? First and foremost, we wanted to provide flexibility to the city to be able to leverage these disparate infrastructures throughout the city. All of these companies have different footprints and are closer to some facilities than other facilities, have different diverse paths for resiliency, and then also to provide efficiencies in cost and access, and then how quickly we can provide them based on what the situation is. Ability to respond to unprecedented situations and events. You know, I think we've spent the last 18 to 24 months in a really unique situation where we had to stand stuff up very quickly. So a lot of times we need to pick the partner that's closest, that can provide the service as quick as possible. Some of those situations were being able to provide testing at the Pepsi Center and some of those other locations for people experiencing homelessness and some of the other things we ran into. Cost control and efficiencies. Instead of just having one competitive process once every 3 or 5 years, we wanted a competitive process for the entire life of the contract. So this provides the ability for us to maintain a competitive nature between all of these vendors throughout the life of the contract and be able to move and transition to where is most appropriate, where we can gain efficiencies, both from cost and velocity and services. And then service capabilities. So allow the city to access the most innovative and up-to-date service offerings. So we want to be able to leverage what benefits both those running the city and those that are consuming services from the city. What are our objectives through the life of this contract? We want to optimize the subscription costs through competitive lower rates. I talked about that a little bit on the previous slide. We want to optimize over the life of the contracts, enhance network performance, be able to provide resilient connections to places that need it, and bring in the right level of service to each facility based on the need and what it's serving. Improve customer service and support. This goes hand in hand with the contract negotiations that we did. We put a lot of work into the contract to make sure that we have dedicated support teams, dedicated customer teams, and things of that nature to make sure that we're maintaining a real strong customer service support from those vendors. Simplified billing process. Again, in the contract, we wrote in a lot of stuff that would allow us to be able to better understand what services we're being charged for.
I'm so sorry to
Sorry.
interrupt you, but Council
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chair Kinich, I think your notes are on the microphone on the podium, and so it's creating a weird echoing. And
so
so
sorry.
you can use your notes, just we don't want you to cover the mic. And I think the producer said that that'll take care of kind of that weird ringing that we're hearing. So thank
I'm
you.
really sorry.
Sorry about that, Councilman Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
Flexibility to procure services. I think we talked about they all have different footprints. They have different maps throughout the city. We want to be able to use what's appropriate and most effective for the city, and then take advantage of new services that may come to be in the marketplace over these next 5 years. And 2 bullets without over the microphone, I'm sorry.
Well, do we have any colleagues in the queue for questions? I have Councilman Hines first.
Thank you, Committee Chair. It's interesting seeing you all the way over. But anyway, good to see you. I do have one question. I think one of the things you mentioned is that you wanted to maintain a competitive environment throughout the entire contract process.
Correct.
But I see different amounts for different vendors, which means that some have a runway for a lot more success than others, and I just don't know the answer. So I'm not trying to ask a leading question, but can you help me understand how you can have a competitive environment and contract amounts that are significantly different?
Yeah, it's actually an excellent question. So we obviously have services with 2 of these vendors already, and we've had them for a long time within the city. We can't immediately move things that are existing. So those contract amounts are based on what we've used in the past, and also to their footprint within the city. I don't have an exact percent, but I would say over 75% are with those two highest bidders that have infrastructure within the city. Zayo makes up another portion of that, but they're just entering into the market. So the contract amounts are based on really what we have today, and then the size of their infrastructure as well.
So it is possible, am I getting this right, that there are some competitive elements and then some non-competitive elements, and we're just putting them in the same contract?
So we have the ability, the way we wrote these contracts, to move as we go along. But moving a service from a single building to another carrier takes time. And it's not something we can do overnight, because we want to make sure we, first and foremost, don't impact any services the city is providing. So from day one, yes, we have to continue with the services we have, but the contracts and the competitive process did reduce our costs across the board on these vendors. And then we will be looking for opportunities over the next 5 years and year to transition to ones that maybe make more sense, or even utilize our internal infrastructure to take over some of those services. So you may actually see some of them reduce.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because we do have, I think the city has the nation's largest internal fiber network. Is that right? The fiber that we have that effectively runs through most of our traffic lights around the city and transportation infrastructure. I want to say it's the largest in the nation, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe I just heard it from maybe I made it up, but maybe I heard it from the tech folks. But I think I also recall, so thanks for bringing up security and DDoS attacks. I think that we have our own fiber that's connected, that we're very careful, we kind of preserve and protect, and we don't allow other vendors on that fiber, even though there's a lot of bandwidth, but it's mostly for security reasons. Am I getting that right? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure security-wise where you're going.
Well, if we have fiber that is city-owned and we don't let another vendor on to that fiber network, and they get hacked, then our fiber might be, carrying stuff that is not in the city's best interest.
So I'm not a security expert.
Okay, fair. Okay, so
we do encrypt traffic that goes across, or data that goes across all of that. So it doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. But being that it does have a lot of public-facing things, and it's out on traffic cameras and things like that, it is more susceptible than something that is in a secure data center.
So I guess one last thread, hopefully just last question. We have the fiber network, but it's my understanding that sometimes the connectivity into a building is owned by a third party, like one of the vendors listed here. Am I getting that right? Maybe I'm misremembering that too. As in, another reason why we can't just separate an agreement with one of these vendors is because we're using their last mile technology to get to in and out of our city-owned buildings.
So we partner on pairing those infrastructures together and how we can do it a lot of times. Todd, are we the last mile, or are they the last mile sometimes, or is it both?
Right now, the carriers are going to be the last mile, but that doesn't mean that.
Can you please, step to the podium?
Okay.
Yeah, and will you let us know who you are too? Sure,
I'm Todd Matthews, work for Sean Greer, Network Infrastructure Manager. So we do, you're absolutely right that we have that fiber network. And we Technology Services work with Dottie Traffic Fiber when we can. So the situation would be, if there's a traffic light, say a new facility that the city's going to build, that may be out in the street. The carrier may already have, a Lumen or a Comcast, may have service into the building already. So we Technology Services would have to come up with the cash to build traffic fiber into the site. So that's really a decision that we make upon budgets or what the need of the facility is.
Thank you, and I apologize. It's yet another question.
Sure.
So we would have to come up with the cash to do that, the building connectivity, to run our own fiber into the building. But we are actively installing additional fiber in the city right now, right? Like right now, like last week it was in front of the art museum.
Sure. That would be a question for Public Works Dottie, but I assume that that's probably the case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Committee Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Hines. Next up, I have Councilwoman Ortega. And please be patient. I have a Granicus system that requires restarting pretty frequently. So, and I'm trying to watch both directions. So if I miss you, thank you for your patience and flag me.
Thank you, Madam Chair Pro Tem. So, Mr. Weir, I have a few questions for you, and I want to start with basics. Can we get an org chart of like who in your team is responsible for what? Because I don't think we've had an org chart for your agency in quite a long time, and that would be helpful. So then my next question is, how do the two contracts with our franchisee, both Comcast and CenturyLink, interface with this particular contract? Do the franchise agreements play any role in this? Is that completely different? How is that different? Why is that different? So somebody can just speak to that. That would be helpful.
I'm going to let somebody that's much more versed in the contracts answer you. Steve.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Hahn, Assistant City Attorney. The franchise agreements that we had with CenturyLink and Comcast are really separate, totally agreements. Those agreements supplying television services to city residents were negotiated at different times and under different circumstances. And other than the fact that you're dealing with CenturyLink or Lumens today and Comcast, they're separate.
So they now have a new name, CenturyLink?
CenturyLink has changed yet again. Their name is now Lumens.
Lumins?
Lumens.
Okay, that's news to me. I didn't realize that. I haven't had cable TV service in a long, long time. Okay, that's very helpful. And there's nothing in the franchise agreement that says there are certain services of any other bundled services they'll provide to us as part of the franchise agreement, because it's solely focused on television, right?
At one point in time, I did those contracts, and my recollection was that as the franchise grantor, that we were entitled to maybe one hookup per building. And I'm going off of a recollection,
Yeah,
which
and
is
that
probably
included like our rec centers and some of our other city buildings, like fire stations, police stations. So as we have like new police stations being built or new rec centers being built, that's where we want to make sure those kinds of things are plugged in and we get that connectivity.
And that's a television service, if you will.
Got it.
And the services here today are different in nature.
Yeah, I understand that. So let me go on to ask a couple other questions about the contract. So does any training for any of our IT technicians, is that included in any of these contracts, or are we simply buying their services for their people to work with us and our agencies, essentially?
So these contracts are for services, and there is not directly training, but they do partner with our teams if there's a portion on our team that needs knowledge. But for the most part, it's not. We don't need the training. It's similar to when you procure internet or TV at your house. They don't provide training to the person at home other than guides and stuff.
I'm talking about our technicians who will interface with these systems that basically handle various services for our city agencies. So, like, for example, you mentioned that you're not the security person. Do we have such a person so that if we're experiencing problems, so I guess the other question is, I don't know if they're on site, if they work on site, or they're a phone call away to help deal with some of the systems that they're managing for us. So if we identify a glitch before they do, is there somebody here on site to manage that, or do we have our own technicians that can flag some of those key issues before we have to wait and call them in?
So,
I know there's a lot there.
Yeah, no, the org chart will help a lot with this, so we'll make sure we get that to you. We do have network technicians and security, an entire city security team, network architects, network engineers that are all part of our teams that understand the way these services work. Part of the customer service part I talked about is we wrote into these contracts SLAs around calling them and being able to contact them if we need to.
Will you describe what that acronym is?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. Service level agreement. Okay. So what their requirement is to keep the service up, and also what their response time is when something goes wrong.
Okay, so do they work on site with our technicians, or
when needed?
Okay,
when
that's
needed.
Good. That's good to know. Let's see. So do we have one consistent telephone service provider across our city, or do we have different telephone providers in various agencies across the city?
So there's different types of telephone services.
Okay.
The central telephone service with the 720-913 numbers, and there's a few other digits that we're used to, is provided actually through Todd's team and is centralized in the city. And that works in combination of a Lumen CenturyLink service and our on-site infrastructure to provide all of that. Now, when in those in the slide, it mentioned a service called analog phone service. That's a very old technology. If you think about when you had or my parents still have a home phone, that's an analog type service. And a lot of the elevator emergency phones or the call boxes you see in parking lots are provided through that service. So there is multiple, but they serve different purposes. But the majority, I'd say over 95%, Todd, is the Lumen and our on-site infrastructure that we provide.
Okay, and does that include our 911 system as well?
I believe the 911 system, I'll have to dig, is a mandated EZNet service, and I do not know the exact acronym on that either, so I apologize, but it is something that is mandated through the state, and they procure it under that contract.
Great, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. I don't have any other members in the queue. I do not have any other members in the queue. Is there anyone else who has any questions? If not, I would be looking for a motion for 751, if someone wanted to make that. It looks like we have a motion and a second. Does anyone want a roll call vote on this, or are we okay moving this on? All right, well, it will move on to the floor, so thank you very much for briefing us. And we have several items in the consent portion of the agenda, but this, I believe, do we have a second item? Oh, thank you. Yes. All right, so can we just adjust that motion? So I cannot see those other bill numbers in front of me, and this is, just let me switch screens really quickly so that I can get to the full list of bill numbers. So that would be 751, 754, 755, and 756. So Councilman Clark is our mover. Would you be willing to adjust your motion to be all four in a block?
Yes, Committee Chair.
Okay, and we have our seconder, Councilwoman Ortega. Excellent. And then we're still good with moving them as a block. All right, anything else to my steady staff here? Okay, thank you. So we have no further business that I see on my agenda, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we then stand adjourned. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
put together sort of an informal alliance and sent representatives to collude with each other, really, in order to manage the strike. It's debatable at any given point how much John D. Rockefeller Jr. really knew about what was going on in the day-to-day operations of the strike, but he had a delegate, and that was Lamont Bowers, the local manager for CF&I. Bowers reflected the attitude of the Rockefellers and of Osgood that unions were a danger to free enterprise.
The strike could have been prevented had Osgood and Bowers been willing to meet with the union leaders. They refused to do that. The operators would not even enter the same room with the union leaders.